Hi everybody. Can you please let me know if you can hear me, if everything is clear, if someone will let me know, that would be great. Good evening everyone. I hope I'm audible. Can everyone hear me? Okay, amazing. Thank you for letting me know. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Ampersand Series. Today, I get to introduce you to a really, really interesting artist. I'm going to formally introduce her first. She is a Carnatic vocalist and a very talented Bharatanatyam dancer based out of Chicago in the US, where she was born and raised. She also teaches a little bit, but as the Ampersand series is about dancers who also have other careers and other paths that they're following parallelly, Sutikshna, who will be talking to me today, is a graduate student of special education at Boston University and committed to growing community resources for education and for well-being. The informal introduction that I'd like to give you is that earlier this week, I connected with her to talk to her about this interview, and I found myself in a really, really interesting conversation with a young, talented artist with lots of ideas and really interesting thoughts. So I can promise you a really, really interesting conversation that you're going to be a I have a request from her, so I'm just going to add her to this. Hi, Sutikshna.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you great. It's really nice to put a face to the conversations we've had over the last few days. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who have come over here for the first time, the Ampersand series is a series started by Neo Nartaki to talk to artists across India and the globe about being artists and also having parallel careers and other interests in other spaces. We would like to have a space to discuss how different fields coexist, how these balances are found. And today we have this incredible artist who's here to discuss her life and her plans and her challenges with us. So, Sutikshna, I would like to start by just inviting you to share with us what your journey with the classical arts in terms of Bharatanatyam and Carnatic music have been thus far for you.
Sure. Um, so in short, I like to call Bharatanatyam and Carnatic music the best choices I never made for myself. So that kind of starts, it has three parts to it. One being when I was younger and initiated into both these art forms. Um, so when I was born, for a little bit of context, kind of, many people start when they're young. But for me, starting when I was young was not to be taken for granted, let's say, because when I was born, I was actually born without a right foot and without a right hand. And so as I grew up, a few months old, I was fit with a prosthesis. So I learned to crawl, learned to walk, a little bit of running here and there with the prosthesis. And my mother, for context also, is a dance teacher. She was trained in India, and then my parents moved here after marriage, and so she had already been teaching by the time I was born. So when I was around 4 or so, they saw a lot of, I'd been singing along with everything, memorizing long songs, and dancing to everything, demanding to have like a little stage set up in the house and things like that. So there was this moment of a pause where they said, should we start her in dance formally, around the age of 4? And should we start her in music formally? And they're like, why not?
Mm.
So it was as simple as that. And I think that question of why not
Mm.
has been kind of my drive that I've carried forward since then. Coming up to undergraduate times and whatnot, I've always found uh, interest in human behavior. And I think that's something that was cultivated by music and dance a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that human behavior is something, I guess, before that, I should say I was able to grow in the arts because of a huge community here, not just in Chicago, but in the United States. It's very interconnected and validates the experience of being a someone who's interested in Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam.
Yeah.
But the human behavior component started largely when I was an undergraduate. Took a lot of psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, English courses, biology, things like that, that kind of looked at, even though they sound kind of all over the place, for me, the science and the humanities were both two sides of the same coin that looked at human behavior. So for me, that was kind of part two. And where I am now, pursuing my master's in special education, it came because right after undergraduate, I knew I wanted to come to India and spend time focusing on just music and dance. But in a small, brief period before I did so, I actually was working at a clinic for kids on the autism spectrum. And that was my first job. I kind of had applied to anything and everything, took the first thing I got. But that was another kind of best choice that I never made or happened to me, you know? So again, that question of why not came into place, and I really, really enjoyed what I got to experience there, because in ways which I didn't expect, I was using the creativity, I was using many enriching factors that I had drawn from music and dance, was able to kind of put into autism-based interventions and therapy. So that's where I currently am. That's kind of what fueled me to make a more decisive turn in my path to take up, you know, music and dance professionally as well as special education, and also make a home of the bridge between those two.
That's really interesting. There's so much to unpack here, so I'm just going to take one piece of it at a time. Maybe we can just start with this, with your experience of being a student. I know that you also teach the arts as well. And I think, I think for a lot of classical dancers and musicians, support starts at home and it starts with the family. And it helps a lot to have parents and an extended family that understand and push you and create that environment where it becomes possible. Did you feel like that there was a definite advantage to having your mom teaching you? Was your experiences as a student with other teachers or teachers here different? And do you think that there needs to be, I guess, a different lens or a certain kind of training to deal with, alternate situations or special situations in a teaching environment?
So I love that question because it's kind of everything that I've been thinking about recently. Short answer is yes, to your last question, because I think diversity training is something that happens in many workplaces, and again, why not in the art spectrum too? To the first part, for my mother being my teacher, that was a huge advantage, largely because I think when many people see me as my physical difference is a visual thing,
Yeah.
especially when I'm dancing on stage and dance being such a visual art of the full body. When I encountered other people, there was a lot of, and I won't go into the details, but I did feel like there was a pause that others took as well, right? Can she do these things? Can she not do these things? How careful do I need to be with her? Does it
Yeah.
hurt? Will she be offended if I stare too long? Does she need help? How much should I offer? All these questions that kind of run through people's head in this moment of pause that they take. And the advantage with having my mother as my teacher, many, but largely is the fact that that pause didn't need to be there. We could hit the road running. She knew my what I was comfortable with. She knew how to push me. She knew how to play to my strengths, all of those things. And so I didn't have a sense of, there was no awkwardness. So that really helped. It's in a similar way. I think I take that kind of same energy into my practice. One of the things I do in teaching music is not just teaching Carnatic music in a kind of traditional format, but also I teach music to some kids who are on the autism spectrum of
Mm,
varied ages.
mm,
And so I really think another benefit that has come of growing up in the US for me is the fact that I've had to kind of distill what are the elements of Carnatic music that have enriched me, what are the elements of Bharatanatyam that have enriched me, and see how I can repurpose those essential elements to be useful for other people in other contexts.
mhm,
So I think having that your own kind of personal boundary of things that you or forming a personal boundary of things you take for granted and things that are different from you can help make that boundary a little bit more permeable. I
mm,
think that in general makes a better life for everyone. I really think that when we learn to cater to the community, we also learn to cater to ourselves. And we enrich ourselves by learning how to train, teach various people of different backgrounds, different abilities, different anything.
mm. I think maybe my question was also coming from a little bit of a personal space. Not only are you a Bharatanatyam dancer yourself and you've managed your challenges your way, but as a teacher of when you interact with people on an autistic spectrum, there is a way to handle um, those interactions. We had a couple of, like one or two students in our dance school also who had special needs, and I remember as a teacher wishing that somebody had equipped me for those interactions. And sometimes I feel like these discussions are important because I think there's a lot in classical arts that's talked about discipline and about pushing and about repetition, and there are situations where that isn't helpful, so I think that's also where my question was coming from, that what would you tell a teacher who was trying to pass on an art form to someone who had an unusual circumstance that they were dealing with, it, whatever it may be. What would you tell them to do differently?
Well, if there's one large takeaway that I could share, the most important thing I've learned so far in the line of teaching is when to not teach,
Mm,
and when to let the other person kind of take the reins.
mm,
Which actually ideally is all the time. Ideally teaching is a collaborative process between the teacher and the student, and both to the point where at sometimes you can ask who is the teacher and who is the student. And
mm,
I don't think there's any power differential or ego that needs to be there at that point, because it is an enriching process for both. So I think kind of more tangibly, um, in a classroom, perhaps, if you see the student trying to do something and they fail the first time, let them try it over again. Don't
mm,
jump in just yet. See if they self-correct, because at the end of the day, you do want to build skills that of independence for that person to have this ability to reflect on their own actions, reflect on their own thinking, their habits and whatnot. So kind of leaving that pause and is enough of an indication that, like, oh, let me hold a mirror to my mind. Um,
yeah.
I guess that's it.
You're
That's the
you're
one.
creating an instinct and an understanding rather than a repetition of something that they're watching. I think that distinction is important. You were talking before about how you went through a time when you were trying to distill what you had learned in Bharatanatyam or in Carnatic music into your other activities, your professional or your academic careers. Do you want to break that down for us a little bit more? Tell us maybe what those things were, how you separated it or didn't separate it. I know you and I had a little bit of a chat about this, so I'd like you to share those thoughts with everyone.
Sure. So I think the best way I can share this is perhaps an anecdote.
Mm-hmm.
Won't cover everything, but cover some major things. So I used to work with this one young kid. At the time, he was around 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he is nonverbal and has some delayed motor planning. So that means when, oh, for context, his diagnosis was autism spectrum.
Okay.
Again, I say diagnosis just because those are things that are kind of a little bit of a evasive term at times, as opposed to saying he is autistic.
Right.
Um, so delayed motor planning kind of is when one is told to do something under on command. We have if I say pick up a pencil, he'll pick up the pencil. But sometimes in delayed motor playing, you either do it far later or may not do it at all. And for a lot of people, especially when one is non-verbal, that can look like non-compliance. You may
Yeah.
many people may misunderstand as, oh, this child is not understanding me. I need to enforce this even more. I need to resort to punishment or things like that.
Mm.
Um, so I think the idea was one of the major ideas is to gain a sense of control over his own muscles
Mm.
um, and kind of act on command. So considering that the ability to act on command was not there or was there very delayed, one of the first things that came to mind was the idea of rhythm. Because in a repetitive rhythm, it is kind of a nice ambiguous mix of who's in control, you or the rhythm. Um, and and especially when it comes to music, we kind of naturally sing along, or it's almost dance and music. Really think are kind of the most natural things a body can do because
Yeah.
it stems from a place of pleasure.
Yeah.
Um, and so one of the things that we did is for for speech or for moving fingers or things like that. We got like a little keyboard. We made like little songs. Like if we're working on the sound of the letter S, we made a song. We found a song that had a lot of the syllable S or sound S in it. And every single place where that word with the S came, I would pause and he would fill that blank in because it's an expected rhythm. So um, I kind of got him to the cyclical nature of it um, got him to be more in control to a point where he was able to actually, do it faster, do it a little bit more on command, things like that. So rhythm was the first is one big way.
Mm.
Speech, motor control. A huge other component is also emotional intelligence, spatial thinking, self-determination, ability to reach out to other people and form a community.
Mm.
All of those things, I think, are just a beginning of a long list of things that you can get when you apply music and dance to education and well-being.
So has that been a process for you? Was it a conscious thing that you had to be like, now dance, now music, now special education? Is it somewhere you got to over a period of time, or was it, or did it just come naturally to you?
Um, well, so growing up here, I have to say, you do feel a stark difference from when you are inside the house and the moment you step foot outside of it.
Mm.
You code switch. You learn to code switch very quickly to the point where you may not even realize you're doing it. Um, so I was compartmentalizing a lot of the time when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And to combine instead of compartmentalizing was a deliberate decision.
Mm.
Um, I mean, from everything, right? Everything from language, the way I dress, the things that are normal to talk about, the things
Mm.
I can, rely on other people to understand as prior or base knowledge.
Mm.
Um, and I think also largely the encouragement that I get from other people. I think that also in the past few years, with kind of more cultural awareness spreading in general, has
Yeah.
been helpful in that sense. But yes, definitely was around probably undergraduate was the time. I distinctly remember messaging a friend somewhere around when I was 20 maybe or 21, saying, you know, I'm realizing I want to be married to the arts. Um, and there was some sort of, apparently had been cooking all this time, but it was a very deliberate decision to combine things for sure, as opposed to thinking about them as separate things.
Yeah. Before I move on to my next question, I just want to let our audience know that the comment section is active. And if you have any questions for our artist for this evening, please put them in. We'd love to interact with some of you as well. So we also had a little bit of a chat about what it was like for you to be practicing a traditional art form in another country, growing up there, being aware of the cultural, maybe some cultural differences in where you were. And we had a chat about being misfits and what that experience was like. How did you, I guess, manage that, deal with that? Was it a factor even in the way that you practice your art form or your profession for that matter?
Yes, in two different ways, I think. So to kind of, I guess, for other people's sake, expand on the idea of a misfit, um, the sense that growing up in school and things like that, that I was a kid with a long braid who was everyone knew to be culturally inclined and you know, didn't wear the same American like top fashion brand clothes.
Yeah.
Whatever, all those things that teenagers are interested in at that point. I really didn't mind whether I had that or not. Um, and I think that was different for me because a lot of people at that point succumb to peer pressure.
Mm,
A lot of people, um, in one very tangible way I can say is a lot of people at that point would pronounce their Indian names in an American way because that's how other people in school had been pronouncing it for them, and so they
mm,
adopted the name other people gave, or the
right.
pronunciation, I guess. Um, I didn't. I made people work to say my name. And my name has four consonants back to back, which is a very
Yeah.
daunting thing to look at it on paper.
Yeah.
But I'd be like, I mean, it wasn't out of anger. It wasn't out of any kind of spite. I simply believed in people's capacity to understand.
Yeah.
I was like, you can say Washington, you can say like Blagojevich, like you can say Sutikshna.
Yeah.
So I just broke it down. I think gosh, I lost track of your question. Oh, misfits. Okay.
Yeah.
This is what happens when we go down rabbit holes. Um, but so that I think it was a misfit then. But I think the two big factors, my parents and my community outside of it, was large enough that it was very validating. I think a lot of credit goes to my parents for normalizing the things that I found myself tending towards. And
Mm,
also a lot of credit to my peers in the United States who were also in a similar boat. In fact, that was probably the most relatable people and will continue to be the most relatable set of people I have. Um, and so that is a validating experience. But the other side of it that was a little bit of fire that kind of came into me when people would like struggle with my name. I'd be like, you know what, I'm going to very low key make this my mission to, spread, um, to kind of, um, I guess, put shortly, take the attention I get and make it into my stage and dance on it.
mm, mm.
Because a lot of people kind of cower when they have, I mean, when we perform, we're used to taking that attention. We're used to that attention. It's a normal thing for people to do to stare at you. You know, you are
Yeah.
the spotlight. But when we're not on stage, um, it can be a very different experience when people are staring at us. A lot of other maybe insecurities, other concerns, other wonderings happen. And I think of another thing of enriching factor of taken for music and dance is the ability to kind of pretend I'm on stage again. And whether that's a classroom, that's a grocery store, um, let me myself be comfortable with that gaze. Let other people be comfortable with that gaze by, smiling, responding, saying, ask me anything. I'm transparent. Um, so yeah, that misfit, I think validation through community and parents, and also kind of the little bit of a thrill that comes with being this prospect of being able to expand ourselves that comes from being a performer and performing for
Mm,
audiences. You kind of
mm.
lead that into rest of it.
I find that answer actually really interesting because I think that a lot of the time, as any kind of artist, you are sort of on display in some sense, right? And it does sort of invite different kinds of gazes, and also in some sense gives people the right to stare or to have an opinion, right? So when you said that you try to pretend you're always performing, I'm wondering if that ever got exhausting. Or because you sound very calm and composed about it, whereas I can imagine it can be tiring, right? To always feel like you're performing.
You've kind of hit on a very nuanced point there. I think it has tired me at certain points in ways that I may not realize. And
Mm,
not like a collective burnout, not at all, because there are some portions of this that never tire me. But I think one portion of where I do kind of get tired of being on display is being a giver. I think a lot of times emotionally, when I kind of like you said, this kind of calm composure is something that I've kind of learned to carry around because it's helpful for other people around me.
yeah,
Um, and I generally do feel that way, but some small percentage of the time, when I have things that, are stressing me out, and immediately I kind of find myself habitually going into this position of, let me put my things aside and be there for this person. Um, and to let myself be the audience for just once, to let the other person kind of take me on a journey or invite me into a space as opposed to me doing the opposite, um,
mm,
is a learning process.
yeah,
So,
I'm
and
sure.
that's something that I'm currently learning, and in my upper 20s, that now I'm finally kind of learning that it's a balance. And even, I mean, I talked about how music and dance have enriched me in my other life otherwise. I think this is an instance where the tables have flipped and my life otherwise has informed music and dance, where now I'm thinking it's actually a balance of taking space and also making space.
Yeah.
When, as a performer, um, I know we kind of talked about this when we chatted earlier too. Um, when we come into a performance, this kind of goes along with the idea of, knowing when to not teach. I realized that audiences kind of come not to be fed an idea, but to kind of
Mm,
be given the room to imagine. So even as a performer, it's a really take space, make space balance, as it would be with the teacher and student, the collaborative process. And to kind of allow myself the freedom to not perform while I'm performing, or to not teach while I'm teaching,
mm,
or to more be and not really think about being.
mm.
Kind of has been a transition that I've been making, and it's been quite healthy, I think, to 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 lean on the network and kind of realize that we're you know we're here for each other, or we're part of the same network, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I think we have multiple times over the last 30 minutes or so have touched upon the importance of a community. And that is something that I've said to myself a lot as well, like feeling connected to Odisha and to the community there and the dancers and the musicians there. So I was wondering if you wanted to tell us a little bit about what it was like for you to come to India. Was it different from how you grew up, and is that an important space to you? How did you break into that, and what value does it bring to your life?
So another thing that I think is goes back to the point of diversity training.
Hmm.
Um, from a young age, I was brought to India every summer. So coming to India was an annual thing, if not like twice a year, especially when it came to growing up and learning to perform during December season in Chennai and things like that. Um, and again, I have to preface all of that with that comes from a huge place of, having the resources to do that. And I'm incredibly grateful for everything that has allowed me to have this kind of varied experiences and make difference the new normal for me. Um,
Mm,
so, so to answer the question in short, probably be I don't know if you asked a yes or no question, but I'm tending to say no. What was the
No,
original
my
question
question was, what was your experience like coming to India, and
again?
what was the value that you got from, the community here, which may be different from the Indian community overseas or your experiences with them. I wanted to understand if it was an adjustment with you coming here, what that experience was like.
Okay, that was the yes or no question. I was trying to see which one in there I was responding to. So no, it wasn't an adjustment. Well, let me qualify that. The idea of coming to India was not an adjustment.
Hmm.
And the things I did there to, but so when I came after undergraduate, I'd been wanting to come to India and focus solely on music and dance for some time. Um, and I think I'd been told always by my parents was get your undergraduate degree, finish it, and then go. So that way you have something, you never know if it may be hard or easy when you come back to education later or need a job or whatever. Finish it. So somewhat begrudgingly, I did. Um, I finished it and I came to India, and I realized for the first time when I came to stay for a longer period, um, it was an adjustment. A lot of things in the especially when I with regarding to how I interacted with other people was an adjustment. The things that I um, learned to like, it was kind of like a pick my battles kind of situation that I learned to do.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I guess that's the gist of my experience there, is that I learned to kind of develop a thick skin, and in a similar vein to like teach, not teach, or perform, not perform.
Hmm.
I kind of learned when to hold my ground and when not to. And I think that was a huge part, because I had, like I said, was someone who always kind of has been putting myself aside for other people, and I
Hmm.
realized that a lot of people with the best intentions would have various opinions on what I did. And some of them are valid. Some of them came from those opinions came from different places. I learned to kind of
Hmm.
filter them through my own thinking, and for the first time I had to listen to my own wants. And I think that's something that another thing that has kind of really helped me as a performer as well. Having that conviction in what I want and letting my mind be a large driving force, as opposed to kind of, taking advice and counsel from others.
Yeah. Um, I think actually a lot of artists have that process. I'm sure that your experience is unique in itself because I think it's different for everybody. But I think getting to that place of deciding where to filter, where to take something, where to say, okay, this is coming from a place where I don't necessarily have to engage. I think that's a process. I don't know if that ever ends. You have some fan comments. Please come to India and explore your art. We are all eagerly waiting to see the wonders you can do. I would agree. I would agree. I spent a lot of time stalking you on Instagram, and it's very cool the work that you've been doing. Um, I wonder if you want to tell us what you've been doing over the last year and a half. How has COVID um, affected your practice? Where have you found yourself in that? Um, how have you dealt with it?
So, you were kind of saying this when we were speaking of, artists kind of go two ways during COVID
Mm,
time. You either kind of get very active publicly, or you kind of recede into your little snail shell or turtle shell.
yeah.
I was the latter.
Mm,
There was a period when I was really, really excited that, like, wow, everyone's connected globally, such an opportunity.
yeah.
And of course, it goes in waves. So the next phase was, I was like, oh my God, this is too much. I have to step away. Um,
Yeah.
I stepped away for a long time, and to be very honest, many people may not like to share these things as artists. I don't know. But um, I didn't practice consistently for some time. Um, and when I say some time, like on the order of weeks, on the
Mm,
yeah, like maybe like even like 2 or 3 months. And I think that
mm,
was a time um, kind of losing it kind of allowed me to come back to it with the knowledge of what it is I want from it. And it's not like I
Mm.
sat there during those 2, 3 months just like thinking about what I want, but I think it's a subconscious process. Like just like I said one day to my friend that, oh, I want to, be married to the arts. It's a kind of, you let it marinate, 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 and one day, like boom,
Mm.
this thought just comes in your head, and it's so bright that you have to take it. So I think COVID in short has been a time when I did more of this kind of distilling process.
Mm.
Um, just danced for myself in my basement. I mean, thanks to lockdown, we really couldn't do it, go anywhere,
Yeah.
perform anything. Um,
Yeah.
so it kind of helped. Another instance of giving me the space to look at introspect on what I find pleasurable, and what are those essential elements, what's a necessary element, what's a sufficient element,
Mm.
um, yeah, I think a large, and as in the realm of performing, it kind of helped me put a finger on the pulse of how to create an effect, um,
Mm.
for like if this is the effect you want to achieve, how do you achieve that as an artist, and not think purely within the um, traditional framework, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, or play around within that framework itself. That was a
I
very
mean, I
vague
think
answer. Sorry.
no, no, it wasn't. In fact, I was just thinking that, in this intense amount of isolation, and I think a lot of us struggled with motivation, with sustaining that motivation. That was a challenge. So, in a weird way, actually, all of us connected online. I think we actually found a little bit of a community, and there were other dancers who were saying it's all right. We are also having a struggle, and somehow it was like you found ways to make yourself feel okay about the fact that okay, I haven't danced for a week, but okay, I'll pick it up now. Um, so I was actually thinking it was not vague at all. I was thinking that it was very familiar actually. Um, but because you mentioned how you want to create an impact, and let's move a little to the creation process as well. How what is that space like for you? How do you decide, let's say, what stories to tell, or what you're trying to do with a performance, whether it's an online space or a physical one, whether it's dance or music? Um, what are your driving factors there? How do you make those decisions?
So I think it starts with a really simple question of how do I feel right now? Kind of being the observer to our own thoughts and emotions. I think as a habit, that's a good habit to have in general, but especially when it
Mm,
comes to channeling that of observations into tangible creations. I think it really starts with the seed question of how do I feel right now? What's moving me? What are the things? What are the strings that are pulling on me right now? And how
mm,
can I pull them back?
mm,
And because a lot of things can happen to us, and they grab our attention and then they go away because that's just how human focus works. So I
yeah.
think one thing I've made a habit of is the moment I recognize how I feel, I make sure to record it in some way, or let myself linger in it, and not necessarily record in terms of like tangibly like voice record or video record, none of those
Mm,
things, but kind of just make a mental note of it, and if it's important enough, it'll come back to me, you know.
mm,
So I think when I'm like listening to something or walking and I'm experiencing something, I'm taking a walk and I just really, really feel good. I'll notice the way I feel good, and without too much, not so much introspection that it like takes away from the actual experience. You're like
yeah.
just focusing on analyzing, but just enough to kind of like lucid dreaming in a way, you're
Yeah.
dreaming, but you're kind of still aware that you are. Um,
Mm,
so I think that's where the creative process starts for me. Not that I've done much in that spectrum in terms of like creating actual things, but I think in the ideation phase, that's I've been able to kind of think about what is it that I want right now, and kind of letting myself be indulgent in the present moment.
mm,
And trying to make it linger a little bit. Because in the act of lingering, you're actually actively kind of recreating that experience in a very brief time. Um, so I think that's where that creative process starts. Another thing that's really, really helpful for me is during this time, like you said, so many people have gone global in their social network. And one of the things, even prior to this, but I think just having a more global network of friends or co-artists
Yeah.
allows you to jam with people who are in different disciplines. And
Yeah.
that, again, that whole idea of normalizing difference from a very uh, younger phase in life helps
Yeah.
with your ability to kind of define like, oh, um, I don't know when. So, for example, I've a good friend of mine plays piano, and when I was first asked to sing Carnatic music along with the piano, I was like, what talam, what ragam, like what,
Yeah.
you know. But the more I kind of just allowed myself to be comfortable with the discomfort,
Yeah.
um, the lack of knowledge, I realized I gained a sense of intuition better that was actually more helpful when I came back to perform
Yeah.
concerts, or even for dance, just to kind of try out contemporary dance for some time, and realized that when I came back to Bharatanatyam, my sense of flow from one movement to another, that kind of intuitive flow of movement, was stronger. I had a better sense of um, what felt good to me, and it doesn't have to please everybody, but I think just
Yeah.
starting with how do I feel, do I like this,
Mm.
is good for anything, music or dance or otherwise, as a seed to kind of create your own experience and not let
Yeah.
others do it for you.
Yeah. You use a very interesting word that I use a lot is indulgent. I've very often said that the creation space is indulgent. You're pulling on strings and you're trying to see where it'll go, and you're not necessarily thinking of what the final product is going to look like. But I think also there comes a point when you are trying to package it and put a neat little bow around it and then put it out in public, right? And I think in some sense it's a shift of your head. And you and I did spend a little bit talking about the creation process versus the consumption process. And I guess my question based on that is, what is the reaction you're hoping for? What are you going for when you perform?
So I know that for me personally, whenever I walk into a room, people do pay attention for some reason or another. It's like I said, maybe a visual difference that they see. Or often in the spaces of special education, I am often the only brown person, or only non-white. Forget brown. Like I'm the only person of color in the room. Um,
Mm,
or in some spaces, I'm a woman, and so that may be of a minority. And in many ways, I've been kind of born into this position where, regardless of where I go, I'm different.
yeah.
Um, Misfits, right? I think um, kind of drawing on this point from earlier about turning attention into a stage. I think when I said I kind of low-key want to make it a mission for people to be able to, say my name and things like that. Jokes aside, I really think that's where this my kind of goal for why I do what I do is there.
Mm,
So I I'll say it in one sentence, and then feel free to unpack it if you like. In short, I want to give people the words they didn't realize they needed, so that they can expand the things that they think are possible. Because I
I'm,
think that when you have a larger vocabulary, more
mm,
languages, more words, and when I say words, doesn't have to mean like verbal words, right? Just language
yeah.
in terms of body as well. Um, you have more. I think the first step to kind of alleviating yourself of burdens, and burden isn't necessarily a negative, things that we feel, things that we're thinking, all of those things I would call burden, or like something that fills our vessel.
Mm,
In order, the act of alleviating it is beautiful for me, to kind of become blank through the process of expression. um and I think in order to do that, you need to articulate. in order to articulate, you need to have words and have someone
Mm,
model for you how to use those words, how one
mm,
can use those words. And so I really, I love when um, when people kind of, have come up to me after a dance performance and said, it took me at least until the Vadnam, like a solid 20 minutes into your performance, to realize you're wearing a prosthesis. I saw your hand, but even that took some time because your lines are so neat. Or like,
mm.
I didn't realize I didn't realize you're wearing a prosthesis on your foot while dancing. Um, and of course, I've had people say things like that and then kind of, still offer to help me wear my shoe or something like that. So um, that aside, but it's a slow process. I understand it
Yeah.
takes some time to learn, and again, I'm also mindful of the fact of something I said earlier, that it's not my responsibility alone to help people,
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
learn, and that would be in fact too egotistic of me to think I could do that. So learning when to not teach is something that I'm doing, but in terms of the effect on others, when I am in that position of a spotlight, I love that aha moment, even in a classroom, on a student's face when they're like, "Oh, I get it now. I've connected these things on my own. This new information and this prior knowledge. Now I've like, you've drawn your own little door and you've unlocked it
Yeah.
and opened like, and now you have a bigger room because
Yeah.
it's expanded your thinking." So I think that's where I come from, because when they have those extra words, that extra perspective of what's
Mm.
possible, and just like notion of like, why not, and that curiosity to learn and connect and all those nice warm great things, um ultimately helping, the ability to kind of look outside of yourself ends up helping yourself, and gives them a sense of peace, gives them a sense of, I've exhausted everything I wanted to do and say and feel. I'm good. So that's where
Yeah.
I, yeah, want to help people get there, and myself.
That's awesome. I'm not going to unpack that at all. I think that's a really, really nice approach to creation, and I think it comes with a sort of vision for something bigger than one person. Um, I just want to. Oh, we have. Okay. I just saw some comments directed at me. People who know me know that I use this word indulgent a lot, when talking about my own creation process. I just want to quickly say to everyone else that we're, maybe about 10 minutes from wrapping up. So if you have questions for Sutikshna or for me or about the series, this is the time to ask. Um, Maybe we'll just give everybody like a minute or so to see if they have any questions for you. Um, so in the meantime, I'll just say that it was a pleasure talking to you, and it was really nice chatting with you, preparing for this interview as well. Um, I think that it's it's a very been listening to this for long, and all I have to say is that Sutikna is an inspiration to all of us. And even if we can assimilate a little of that from her, it'll make our lives a lot more colorful. He actually said exactly what I was about to say, which is that, um, people have all kinds of battles, and I think it's very inspiring and encouraging to see people who just do the things they love and do it with so much love in their hearts and so much passion in their hearts. And I have a lot of admiration for that in whatever form it takes. Um, so thank you so much for giving us this time. Uh, yes, Masoom, I have taken your name. Oh my God. Drama. Masoom is also a very, very talented Bharatanatyam dancer. Other than the fact that he's very mean to me, he's a wonderful, wonderful dancer. Uh, um, so if we have any questions, like wrapping up questions for Sutikshna today, I'll also take a second to tell you that there are a few more of these interviews lined up over the next few Saturdays. So please follow the Neo Nartaki page, tell your friends. This is a safe space. It's a space for conversation. Um, oh, Anita ma'am is here. Thank you so much for giving us both the opportunity to have this conversation. I really enjoyed this one. I mean, I enjoyed all of them, but today was, I think we talked about things that were important to both of us, and it was really nice to connect with an artist on these things. So if we have any questions, this is the time to ask.
If people are typing those things out, I wanted to make a point on the word of indulgence.
Okay, go ahead.
It took me a long time to be okay with that, and different people, different personalities. For me, the
Yeah.
idea of indulgence sounded really, really scary because I didn't like who gave us license to just do whatever we wanted. But I realized we have a we are I guess getting in tune with how you feel really helps gauge also when am I taking a penny less and when am I taking a penny more.
Mm.
But US currency terms, so clearly you know where I'm from. But yeah, you get a good sense of indulgence is not the same thing as overindulgence. And when I realized that
Yeah.
distinction made me a lot for those who kind of have my personality type, I guess can relate to feeling safe to do what you want now just because you know that you already all you have to do is pay attention to yourself to know
Yeah.
you're not when you're going overboard or when you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also we should give our audiences some credit, you know. I feel like people know when experiences come from an organic place, and when you're creating from an organic place, there has to be a space of indulgence. There has to be a space of, I'm just going to do it and then see what comes out of it, and hopefully it'll reach somebody and it'll be relevant to somebody. I think that space is really important, and it's something that I also shied away from a really long time because I was, why is this worth someone else's time, right? But maybe there's a space where you don't need to immediately ask that question. Maybe it can come a little bit later, and maybe that's okay. Um, but okay, maybe that's, I think so. This video will be also posted onto the Neo Nartiki timeline, so people will be able to watch it later. Um, so maybe right now there aren't any questions, but if you guys do have questions, you can post it on the comment section. And if Sutikshna is able to see it and answer, she will. So I will just wrap up and say thank you to New Nartaki and thank you to Sutikshna for your time. I know it's early in the morning over there, so thank you for making this time to talk to me and share your very, very. Oh, here you go. Okay. How have critics and scholars reacted to you?
So um when I come to perform in India, because that's the only place I think I've had like a review done for me explicitly. Um, I've had a lot of people tell me that I'm an inspiration. I've had people tell me kind of immediately focus on the physical difference and wonder and say things like, "Oh, it must have been so difficult to get over that challenge," or it's amazing that you've achieved what you have. Um, I had a love-hate relationship with that kind of so to preface, I'm obviously always extremely grateful for people who are who take the time to come up to me and communicate those things because I love having those conversations. But for a long time, I while I was glad that they had some takeaway from it, um, the fact that the inspiration, I thought the inspiration was linked to my physical difference, and that was a little bit bothersome for me because it felt like I was being defined by something that I was trying, that I didn't define myself by, and I hoped that my performance would speak for itself, that, um,
Mm,
that I didn't define myself by it. It took me some time and a little bit of trust. Like you said, don't undermine the audience.
yeah.
To realize that there are things, people did see beyond the surface level. People were kind of reading into it and they just maybe didn't have the words to articulate. Some people really did kind of focus on the surface level, um, of like, wow, it must have been so hard without really knowing that, um, without thinking about one thing, like, if I've been born with something, this is the only way I know to live.
Mm,
Um, and so it wasn't a challenge for me in the same way someone who may have lost a certain ability in their life and had to become differently abled. So so, but I think it is also the I completely forgot the second part of what I'm going to say. But I think that's mainly it. I basically said that was the general
Yeah.
reaction I've gotten from, that's amazing that you can do this. And I've kind of learned to just say thank you and kind of leave it there. Uh,
Yeah, actually, the first thing that struck me about you is when you said, "I'd have never known any other life," and there was no, you never presented it as something that is some huge thing that you overcame. And I think sometimes from the outside, that's how you look at it going in. So I feel like that perspective was important for me to note as well. In my interactions with you, it was not a huge point of conversation where we talked about all kinds of other things, right? So yeah, sometimes you just have to say thank you, and sometimes you need to find an opportunity to explain why that was. Maybe there was something else you could have said.
Sure. And that's the best way to normalize it, as opposed to
Yeah,
making it this the same like penny more, penny less kind of thing. Just
yeah,
saying thank you and leaving it allows it to, just it's a difference just like any other. That's it.
yeah.
Move on.
Well, thank you so much again. It was a pleasure talking to you. This video will be posted on the timeline, and there will be more interviews over the next few Saturdays. Thank you, everyone who stayed with us, who joined us, who sent us reactions and comments. Thank you for being here this evening. We will see you on this page next Saturday with another artist, and Janani Murli will be handling that interview. Thank you, Sutikshna. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend, and I will connect with you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.